Hey, good morning, Long Beach. We are out here again with another interview. This time we are going to be interviewing the councilperson for District 3, Suzie Price, who is now running for mayor. So we are going to get started here. We are at the hotel. It used to be the old Motel 6 on PCH and 7th. And now it's Transitional Housing. So we're here to talk to Suzie more about this project and other projects. So here we go. See if I can do this with my nails. I can! Yay! Introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Suzie Price. I'm the 3rd District Council member and a candidate for mayor.
And what on earth is making you decide to take that leap and run for mayor of Long Beach?
Well, I've had the privilege to serve as the council person now for 2 terms, almost 8 years. And it's been an amazing experience. But I care so deeply about this city and the future of this city and where we're headed as a city. And when the mayor decided that he wasn't going to run for mayor and that he was going to run for Congress, it opened up an opportunity for us to think about who the next mayor of this city is going to be. And I'm really proud to have laid my roots here in this city, raising my boys here in this city, small business owner in this city, care about the future of this city deeply. And I want to make sure that we are on the right trajectory to be the full potential that we have as a city, to be able to attract businesses to this city, provide more job opportunities in this city, expand the sectors that we have in this city that provide good paying jobs, and really enhance our cultural aspects of the city and what we offer as a city. We're amazing opportunity given where we're located, the diversity of our beautiful city, and everything that we have to offer to anybody who lives here currently or others who might want to invest in the city. And I care so deeply about the future of this city and where we're headed, and I'm running for mayor because I have a vision that brings us together and unites us as a city and makes us stronger and better together.
And during your for those who don't know, can you give us just a rough description of the boundaries of your district, District 3?
Sure. So in December of this year, we did a redistricting. And so the district boundaries have changed. But for the most of my time as a council person, the boundaries have been mostly along the coast on the south side. And then on the north side, Atherton was always our main point. So everything south of Atherton, we had the university as part of our district. We had the VA hospital as part of our district. And then on the western boundary, we went to Junipero. So where the Long Beach Museum of Art is, that was kind of our westernmost boundary. We border right up to Seal Beach, which is in Orange County. We're probably about a mile away from Seal Beach, where we're standing right now, maybe a mile and a half. And we are referred to as the southeast portion of Long Beach.
And what do you think were some of the most pressing issues in your district during your time as a council person?
Well, I think the issues that have been pressing in my district during my time as a council person are really common issues that affect every resident throughout the city. And I'm learning that now as I go out and I talk with residents throughout the city. Obviously, quality of life is huge. You know, when people open up their front door and they look to the right and the left, what they experience from their city, what their city is doing for them, how well the city is maintaining the area that they live in, the parks that their kids play in, the places where we have programming, public safety, those quality of life issues are huge for residents all over, and certainly they have been for residents of the 3rd District. That's been a major issue. Another issue for the 3rd District has really been, and again, it's the same issue that we've seen throughout the city, is how we're addressing the homelessness crisis and what we're doing to provide meaningful outreach to connect people to services. That's been a huge issue in the 3rd District and one of the reasons why we're standing where we are today. But that's also a big citywide issue. Those have been some of the biggest issues, but really quality of life issues that impact the pride that people feel in the communities that they live in.
And can you tell us why we are here and a little bit background about this hotel in the back?
Sure. So this is the site of the former Motel 6, and it was transitioned to a project, HomeKey. And it's been a really great project. I've worked really closely with the operators on site here to make sure that the neighborhood impacts have been minimal. You know, of course, when a project like this comes to your neighborhood, I mean, there are residences right next door to us. I can see them as I'm talking to you. People get concerned. You know, what is this going to mean for our community? What is this going to mean for our quality of life? Is this going going to increase, for us, is it going to increase crime? Is it going to increase people loitering in the area? What is it going to do? And there were a lot of concerns about it. But I came out very early and I said, look, when we're talking about addressing whether it's a housing issue or a homeless crisis issue, we need to think about it from a standpoint of, every district has to do their part to address the issue. You can't just put the solution on other districts. Everyone has to do their part. And I told the residents, I said, I'm going to work with the operators on site to make sure that the impacts are minimal in terms of quality of life. This is a good project. The operators are responsible, and it's going to be an excellent project. And so I've built the trust with the residents over the last 8 years that they were willing to trust my word. And I've been very consistent in making sure that we work with the operators here. The site rarely has any vacancy. They offer transitional housing, so people who want to accept housing, who were experiencing homelessness before but are willing to accept housing, will come here. It's a harm reduction model, which means that you don't have to have gone through medical detox. If you have a substance abuse issue, you can come here. There really is a very supportive model in terms of if you are dealing with substance abuse issues, if you are still using, that doesn't prevent you from being able to get the services here on site. They have a nurse on site, and they have all sorts of supportive wraparound services to help people transition to independent living. The goal is that from here they would transition to permanent supportive housing, so that they're living independently, but they have some subsidy that's helping them accomplish that goal. It's been a really successful project. Like I said, rarely is there a vacancy, and when there is a vacancy, they fill it right away with someone who wants to avail themselves of the services, and it's been really great.
Nice. What is your view on? Let's get into some different topics, since we just touched on the homeless. What is your view for the cannabis industry here in our city?
Well, look, I, like many other people, had a lot of concerns before we had brick and mortar cannabis shops in the city of Long Beach. There were so many illegal operations going on, and just throughout the region and throughout the country, there were situations that seemed to be filled with a lot of public safety concerns, but because it was all cash business, a lot of times there was weapons involved with people that were carrying the cash, a self-protection mechanism. And so there was a lot of concerns about what that bringing the industry on in the city of Long Beach would mean. For me, what we have done has been really amazing because we're now working with legitimate business operators that want to have an industry that's legitimized and accepted and following protocols, safety protocols, from a consumer standpoint, but also from a public safety standpoint. And they've really been great partners. And we have, I think, 4 brick and mortar shops in my district. I've worked really closely with all of those business owners to establish their operations. I think they've done a really great job in terms of making sure that the fear that people had about the industry are dispelled just through their operations, their business operations. They've been incredibly responsive, educated me tremendously on the industry and some of the detriments of not cracking down on illegal operations, which has been a deficiency in the past. And I think we've come a long way in terms of that industry. I've been very supportive of the businesses that are in my district and businesses citywide that go through the process of obtaining all the permits and the licensing and go through the process to ensure that consumer protections are in place and, of course, neighborhood impacts are mitigated. And we've had really no issues that I'm aware of, certainly not in my district, so I've been very supportive of the industry.
Cool. Another aspect of that I would like to add is the taxes that we enforce on our cannabis industry are unlike any other industry that we have, so always supporting these brick and mortar shops and everybody who has to abide by the law. Giving them an opportunity to compete by lowering their taxes, I think, is a great idea.
I do too, and that's something that we've taken up as a council, and I've voted in favor of exploring that, and I think that's something we should explore.
Cool. And then also let's talk about public safety. Since you've been council person for 8 years, you were with us through the George Floyd protests and everything that has come since then, the Reconcile for Listening and all of that. Can you tell us what you believe your relationship with the police department will be moving forward, if you become mayor?
Sure. Well, as mayor, I'm going to have a positive relationship with the police department. Does that mean that you turn a blind eye when there are best practices that aren't being followed, or when there are violations of what we all expect as best standard of practice? No, that doesn't mean that. First of all, when it comes to public safety, I chaired the Public Safety Committee for many, many years. And one of the things that I really pushed for early on, before the George Floyd murder, was transparency and accountability. I was one of the council members who pushed for body-worn cameras. The city kept telling us that it's too expensive, we can't afford it. And a city of our size, with a police force of our size, to me, you have to invest in the police department in order to ensure accountability in terms of best practices. So now we have body-worn cameras on every police officer, which I think has been huge. We also need to think about how we build public trust. Like, as I go out and I talk with people all throughout the city, everybody wants to feel safe. There's not been a single person that I've talked to who has said, we don't want patrol officers, we want longer response times when we call the police. But what people have said is, do we really need the police to be responding to a lot of things like homelessness? And the answer to that question is no. So we need to invest in systems that are more preventative, systems that are much more effective in terms of building that public trust, and making sure that our police department is using best standards and building that community response and that community relationship that they need. So things like, for example, when we're talking about accountability, I've been a big champion of certain trainings that are now being utilized throughout the nation for police officers, like bystandership liability. There's all sorts of data out there that shows that when you change the culture of a police department to include bystandership liability, active bystandership, that you're going to see use of force incidents, and just incidents that maybe aren't a violation of policy but just aren't right. You're going to see those go down. When you think about police department, and I've heard people say, well, everyone makes mistakes, there's bad actors in every industry. That's true, but there are certain industries where if somebody makes a mistake, that mistake is devastating, not just to the person with whom they made the mistake on, but the community around that person. A doctor, for example, a doctor can't afford to make mistakes in an operating room because it could cost someone's life. Does it happen? Yes. But the mistake in that arena, as opposed to most other jobs, is huge, right? It's not something that you can just look past and say, oh, it's just a mistake. Same is true for prosecutors, police officers, and judges. When we're talking about the criminal justice system, and I know this firsthand, you can't afford to make mistakes because mistakes impact people's lives and they impact their communities. So as we're building our public safety infrastructure in the city, we have to take into account the things that build trust in our police department and the things that allow for transparency and accountability of our police department. That doesn't mean we invest less in our police department. In fact, rarely do you invest less in something and get a better result. That just does not happen. The body-worn cameras is a classic example. Had we not invested the millions of dollars that we needed to into the police department, we wouldn't have that layer of transparency that we have now. Same is true for the ABLE program, which is our bystandership program. We just got $1.2 million from the federal government, plus money that we're going to put in ourselves, for a $2 million training program that our police department had to apply for through Georgetown Law School's ABLE program. That's an item that I brought to the Public Safety Committee. That's going to change culture. It's going to make a huge difference. It's going to stand for the premise that if you're a police officer and you're out there and you're seeing something that isn't right, whether it's a violation of the policy or whether it's just not right, it's not how you treat another human being with dignity or respect, it's not okay, you have a duty to say something about it. You have a duty to do something about it. It breaks down the culture that's been in place for a long time, not just with the police department, but a lot of public safety departments where it's a culture of protection. So I think, public safety, to me, it's actually beyond the police department. It's everything. It's what are we doing to prevent people from falling into the criminal justice system to begin with. I've been, for over 10 years, involved in mentorship programs like our gang reduction and intervention program in Orange County, or Orange Outreach, which is another program where I go to a school. I'm not doing it right now during the campaign, and it's just time permitting, but for years I'd go to an elementary school where there's gang issues or issues where children are pressured and exposed to things that could easily take them off the right path and put them onto a criminal justice path, and doing an early intervention with 4th graders and 5th graders and talking to them about how do you, what do you do when you come into contact with people who are trying to get you to do something that you know isn't right? How do you, things like changing their route to school so that they can avoid coming into contact with a group of people who are trying to get them to do something that they know isn't right or they know doesn't feel right to them, whether it's to carry something or to do something, put in some work. And so I've been involved in those programs, and they really do work, but you have to be consistent about it. You have to make sure that those youth have an opportunity to get involved early. I've been a big supporter of that, but that's all under the public safety. It's not just a police issue, it's a holistic issue.
I live in downtown, and it's become a little bit, I feel that you guys want downtown to pop off so hard. Like, you want businesses back on Pine Street. You want that energy back down there. And I just see one abandoned building after another, and, it just doesn't have that feel yet. And when you look at all of the construction going on downtown and all of the people that we are, trying to lure into downtown, and it creates more congestion when it comes to parking, and you have all those people also have animals, and so that without green spaces. So when we see about how many people we are literally trying to attract to downtown, what is your opinion on that? Because it doesn't look like the infrastructure at the moment is able to handle the influx that the city is anticipating moving to downtown Long Beach.
Well, we think a lot about the impacts to our existing infrastructure systems every time we accept a new development into the city. So things like parking, making sure projects are not underparked, things like infrastructure into the city utilities. Those are all factored into when a project is approved. So although sometimes it may seem like the infrastructure isn't there to accommodate a new development, that's all factored into the approval process. It's not as though it's ignored and then you're dealing with it after the fact. There's actually site plan review processes that talk about all the different things that you just mentioned. So if a development is coming, the city has determined through best practices with development services and the models that they have to utilize that the infrastructure is there to bear it. Now, when you're talking about parking, when you're talking about congestion, that obviously we can't accept projects that are underparked anymore. We just can't.
It just seems silly to me that projects get approved for each place being 1.5 parking spots, but it's a $3,000 studio, or the 2-bedroom is $4,000. So obviously, more than likely 2 people need to split that rent, and who in California does not have a vehicle? So if we've got 1.5 parking spaces for 1,000 new units, and I am downtown and you're already so congested. The city makes over $9 million a year on street sweeping and parking tickets, and it's amazing to me that they haven't been like, okay, the requirement now is 2. The requirement now is 2.
Well, that's a good point, and that's definitely something we need to look at. I'll tell you, we're looking at that in Belmont Shore. It's not downtown, but still a very parking impacted area. And we're looking at how do we define parking spots. Is the traditional way that we've required parking and accounted for parking still work today? And what can we do to kind of change some of those models? Because you're exactly right, the congestion is felt by the residents who see people circling the streets looking for parking
all night.
And speaking of street sweeping, by the way, we have GPS systems in our street sweeping vehicles, and so I brought an item to council, and I'm going to push back on it because we haven't heard back, but it was to give people notification when...
That's what we need. We need a damn app so we don't have to sit there and tour. Yeah.
Well, that's an item that I brought, which is that, they would let you know when the street sweeper is coming so that you can move your car, but also once the street sweeper has passed, now you have a whole other side of the street that's available for parking again. So people can now park back on the other side of the street because the street sweeper has already left. So that's an item that I brought to council. But, I get what you're saying. I think we need to look at that. We really need to look at that, especially in the downtown area. Is our current parking requirement sufficient? Because you're right. Look, we want to be a multimodal city where people are biking and using transit, but we're not there yet. Everyone is connected to their cars. Everyone is reliant on their cars. And most families have more than 2 cars. I mean, that's the reality. And so although we'd like to get to a place where we're saying we need less cars because people are biking places, that's just not the reality in the city of Long Beach right now. It may be the reality in 10 years or 15 years. A lot of the bike infrastructure that we're putting into place today isn't really for today. It's to build the infrastructure for the trends that we hope to see moving forward as we work towards some of our environmental issues and lowering emissions and encouraging people to not get in their cars, things of that nature. We're building infrastructure for the future. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that's something as mayor, I think we would need to have an honest conversation about all the development that we're approving and the impact that that's having on existing residents. You know, it's one thing to try to recruit people to come and invest in the city and buy in the city and develop in the city. It's another to think about how's that going to impact the people who already live here, our current residents, and what are we doing to make sure that their quality of life is not impacted in a negative way as a result of this incentivizing of
or that
development.
They're completely displaced. You know, sometimes when you get those big high rises next door and now they have a Starbucks, oh well, next door, even though you've been living there for 15 years now, it's deemed fancy or in a better area.
That's right.
And even though they don't renovate or do anything, they knock up the rent prices and displace people that have been there for in their own communities.
Well, of course, because as a result of the new development coming, the property values for everybody now has gone up and market rate has changed. And so when market rate changes, especially now with some of the rent cap laws that have been passed, everyone's raising their rent to be market rate because they don't want to fall behind on their return on their investment, right? It's causing people to, everything's going up because nobody wants to not be at market rate. It's a new focus on being on market rate that wasn't there before, and market rate keeps going up. And so everyone's trying to rise their prices to be what market rate is because they don't want to fall behind on what they're potentially able to collect on rents. And so it's an issue that I think we really have to focus on and try to encourage. You know, the other thing that really worries me is a lot of our smaller property owners are now selling or divesting their interest to larger conglomerates. I mean, there was a whole 60 Minutes episode on it. What I don't think anybody in this city wants is for large conglomerates who manage properties on a large scale nationwide to come in and take over a lot of the mom and pop buildings that are managed.
Because that's what makes it somewhat affordable, right? When you're dealing with a mom and pop and keeping our community diverse and still having a heart, like these corporations that come in and purchase the buildings. If you're one day late, you're just out.
It's transactional.
It's
transactional. And when I talk to small property owners, they'll tell me over and over again that for years they've been working one-on-one with tenants to create individualized plans to keep people in their homes. And the more restrictions they get, the more they're likely to consider divesting, consider not improving the properties, or treating it more transactionally in terms of, okay, well, this is now this regulation that's on me and I have to apply it in a blanket way. And that hasn't been good for us. It's an unintended consequence. So we want to try to encourage more of those housing provider renter relationships that's more balanced, where people are working more directly one-on-one, that human component of it, that I feel we're at the cusp of losing, frankly, because we've created a situation unintentionally where it's more of an adversarial relationship than a collaborative one. And I've heard so many property owners say, you know what, I'm getting bids for this building that I own far exceeding what I owe on the property. And
as a business person, you usually do the business.
And I don't want that to happen because most of our small property owners care about the city. They live in the city, they care about the city, and I don't want them divesting their investments to someone who has no connection to the city. I just don't think that's good for our cities. I think we need to do everything we can to try to, the thing about Long Beach that's really great, that's amazing, what I love about this city is that throughout this whole city, in all 9 districts, you have neighborhoods that are so well connected. They feel like small towns everywhere you go. I'm going to be walking later today in North Long Beach with a group of community leaders who feel like they live in this small town, and yet it's this huge urban city. And maintaining that character, maintaining that feel, that's what makes Long Beach special. That's what makes us different than LA. It's what makes us different from Orange County. It feels like a small town in your neighborhood. And the more we have people who are invested in this city, being the ones that own the small businesses, being the ones that own the properties, being the ones that are giving back to the neighborhood in terms of having skin in the game and reinvesting into the neighborhood, the better our communities are going to be, the stronger our communities are going to be. And I think it's really important to remember that. That's so special about Long Beach, is that we have amazing neighborhoods, no matter what district, that feel like they're a small town. And I think we need to do everything we can to foster that. And we do that by making sure quality of life needs for every resident are at the top of our priorities. Not being dismissive or judgmental about if someone is bothered because there is a dumped couch or a mattress on their corner and they feel like the city's not doing enough about that. That's an important issue for them. And we shouldn't judge it as, oh, it's just a dumped item, get over it. That's not a big deal. I'm focused on these other bigger issues here. Because to them, it affects their pride in their community. And we need to make sure, and that's one of the things that I think I've done really well as the 3rd District Council person, that as your next mayor, I would do citywide, is just make sure that those quality of life issues that impact people's daily experience are managed at a gold standard level, that we're delivering as a city at the highest level possible for those things that people really care about. They don't want to drive over the same pothole every day and feel like they're complaining to their council office and nothing is getting done. They don't want to drive by dumped items or encampments that have been there for days and days and the clean team hasn't posted and clean team hasn't removed. Because to them, everybody wants to do right by their families. Everybody wants to feel like I grew up with a single mom. We moved 10 times between the age of 7 and 18. We immigrated to this country. And just depending on what our finances were, we moved from apartment to apartment. And my mom's goal in life was to give me the best life she could. And the neighborhoods that we grew up in, the neighborhoods where she could afford for us to rent in, it was important for her daughter to feel like my mom is providing a good life for me. It was a sense of pride. As an immigrant to this country, she wanted to make sure that I had the best possible life that she could provide. So if our needs were ignored in our community because it seemed like, well, who cares? It's just a dumped item. Get over it. It's just an abandoned car. Get over it. Not that anyone's saying that, but if you feel that the city thinks that way, you don't have a lot of pride in your community. And I think it's really important that it may seem very minuscule, but those quality of life things are huge for people. Is the city listening to me? Is the city listening to me? It's important.
So if you were to be voted mayor, what is your campaign mantra that you want to tell Long Beach right now?
We are one Long Beach, and we need to make sure that we help do whatever we can as a city to find out what the needs are for each neighborhood and each community, and figure out how do we make sure those needs are met. What is it going to require? What's going to be required to make sure that we meet the needs of every community, so that every community feels stronger, every community feels that the city is listening to them. And we shouldn't presume that we know what every community needs on the day-to-day to feel better about the city's response to them, the city's service to them. We need to ask, we need to have those conversations. What is it that you need to feel that your community is thriving, to feel pride in your neighborhood? What can we do? And it might be as a small thing that the city can do easily, or it might be a large thing that's going to require long-term visioning and long-term goal setting. Whatever that is, as the mayor of this city, I'm going to be listening to every community and doing my best to figure out what do they need and how do we get them what they need to thrive. It may be the same for everyone, but probably not. It's probably going to be different for everyone. There's going to be core basic needs that every community needs, but beyond that, some communities may need a little bit more of this or that and more investment. And that's something that I'm hoping that we can work together to bring us together, not divide us, but to bring us together as a city to make us better.
And for people who want to help you with your campaign or learn more about you, where can they go?
You can go to SuziePriceForMayor.com, and that's the number 4. So SuziePriceForMayor.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for speaking with us today, Susie, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.